The next presentation we have prepared, we literally finished these slides 5 minutes ago, is the short-term future work. Now, a lot of this we've already discussed and mentioned, but we figured it was a good idea to outline this a bit again. And maybe if people are wondering, okay, this is interesting, I want to help, where can I help? This is a good overview. So the first one, the obvious one maybe, is the bot. I think this is something that it should be maybe like the top priority in the coming week. So getting all the work that Thomas has done actually merged. So this pull request, I think it should be very close to being able to merge this. It doesn't have to be not missing features or something. It's a very good starting point. We have a bot that works, that has been tested thoroughly. It's certainly not perfect, but once it's in there, we can open issues for the various things that we think can be improved. Prioritize them as well, and probably give them to different people because they're going to be in a small corner of the bot, rather than having to redesign the whole thing. So getting this merged, I think, is a very important step. Once that's done, the next big step, important step, could be implementing the deploy phase, which I think is not a lot of work. So all the software that the bot builds for the different targets, it could also become responsible for actually deploying that into E. And there we have some automation in place already, so I think the bot doesn't really have to do a lot of that. Once we have that, we can start actually using the bot in production. So we have ideas for the next pilot version, and we want to cut out the human there as much as possible in terms of building and deploying to automate that whole cycle. If we want to focus our efforts there a bit, it's probably good that we only run the bot in AWS, in cluster in the cloud, where we can build for Intel, AMD, ARM, and whatever we can build for there, we will. And other stuff we can either do it manually or fire up another bot once we're confident enough that it's working well. So these first 3 bullet points, that I think is a major goal for next weeks, months, hopefully as soon as possible. It's also a clear goal in the multi-xscale project. I think 3 or 6 months into the project, we put a milestone there and said, we want this bot operation. Running ahead of that a bit already, so we have to do it anyway in the project. Then once that works, and that's probably going to take a couple of iterations to have it working well and stable, we can start looking into the test phase as well. So that's where, again, Caspar stock comes in as well. So certainly smoke tests. We build something in our build container, which is Debian 10 currently. We want to take that installation and run the smoke tests in a RHEL 8 container and see is it broken, is it absolutely broken or not. If it passes the smoke test, it's probably good enough to deploy. And we can take things a bit further there as well if we want to, rather than just very lightweight smoke tests. If we have the resources for it, we can do a bit more serious testing before deploy. We can take that as far as we want to, as far as it makes sense. Yeah, and a bit of iteration over this is probably going to. But I think that's a very important. Very soon. Another thing we've discussed, we have already grabbed the domain easy.io, which I think a domain like easy.io makes a bit more sense than easyhpc.org, since HPC is already working yourself into a corner there. Maybe we didn't realize that enough early on. I'm not sure, so we're definitely not only focusing on HPC, we want to make this more open. That's a good thing. The .io part I like because IO is, well, things are flying all over the place in the background, downloading stuff, so it makes total sense to me. We should probably then move the easy website as well to the domain to have things a bit more consistent. Right now, the website is mostly set up by Jaco. It looks really nice, but we're really not actively maintaining it, and that's, I guess, also a time issue on your end. Give me access to it as well. I can, but yeah, just not touching the website, right? So that's a shame. I think if we set it up a bit better, the way we set up the documentation. Now, I'm not going to claim we're doing a very good job with the documentation currently, but that's definitely a lower bar to entry. If people can send us a pull request to update something on the website, which is something we're now doing when updating the meeting page, like adding the slides and the YouTube links and all of that. That's very easy to do. Just a pull request, somebody else looks at the merge, and the website is updated automatically. So basically, anyone can help out with keeping the website up to date. Having a news section there is probably something that makes sense. That could become 3 lines of markdown to add something to the news section through pull request, so it becomes a lot more easy. And you're basically making it a community effort to start adding stuff to the website. That's probably a good idea. We don't want to break the old domain, of course, so some kind of redirect or something like this, we definitely want. Now, next to the website, we should move our Stratum 0.1 network, so our CVMFS network, to that domain as well. That's painful. That's sort of a hard break. People are using our old easy configuration. At some point, it just doesn't work anymore. You can put up a big fat banner there. If you source the init script with the old repo, it just says, please move to the new domain. And at some point, that's just on a hard break. Probably good to do that now and not 3 years from now. Now is still acceptable, and we can get away with that. That also includes renaming the CVMFS repositories and stuff like this. We also have a separate domain, actually, easyinfra.org. So that's what Terje is using to set up login nodes and all the stuff he talked about yesterday. We're going to keep that, and that's a deliberate move. That's a separate domain. That actually makes sense for different reasons. But that's not exposed, let's say, to the outside. Yep. Yes, Terje, I'm saying yes to you. We could set up an easyinfra.io as well. Yeah, sure. But does it matter a lot? Because as far as I know, easyinfra.org doesn't leak to the outside world, does it? It does. Yeah, okay, but then what's the reason for having 2 domains? That still makes sense? Hosted, there's nothing hosted at all now. All we have is the domain. Cloudflare is the DNS. So, yeah, I think a good idea. This is also a short-term thing, right? So, and it's connected to this. So our VMFS network, we're going to switch to a new domain. We can combine this with switching to a new Stratum 0. So right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but the Stratum 0 currently is a VM in an OpenStack setup in Groningen, which is okay. But one thing we cannot do there is do a proper secure setup with YubiKeys, since it's a VM, and yeah, you can't really plug a YubiKey directly into VM. It doesn't really work. We've actually planned budget in this in the multi-xScale project. So pretty much all of the money is for personnel. There's some travel budget as well, and there's how many? Certain amount of or something. Yeah. Yeah, there's enough to buy a server with lots of storage. It doesn't have to be a very special machine, but a physical machine makes more sense, because then you can also use YubiKeys to have a more secure setup. So CVMFS has this weekly, well, you can pick how often, you can pick how often the CVMFS whitelist has to be signed. And one way of doing that is through a YubiKey. So you have an actual physical secure setup. Yeah, then other things, physical machine, very strict firewall, so that becomes a clear attack surface in some sense. If someone wants to do something malicious, they will have to do. So that has to be a very secure setup, strict firewall. Right now, the current Stratum 0 is basically only managed by Bob. Bob is not around. Let's say, hypothetical, he has a baby or something. Not around for a while. That's a bit of an issue. We have cron jobs running, and we can still push things to stratum 0 as long as it goes right. Transaction hangs in CVMFS, for example, which sometimes happens, and we're not sure why. That's a problem. So maybe we can fix that with the setup as well. We probably want to have copies of those YubiKeys as well if running down or whatever happens, but we don't lose full access. And then a separate publisher node, rather than doing it directly on stratum 0, is probably a good idea as well, for a number of reasons. So yeah, this is something we should probably do before we can call ourselves production.
Just one reality check between the physical servers and the YubiKeys. Does that mean that for every update, you have physical access to?
No. So the YubiKey thing is, I think by default the CVMFS whitelists, so is re-signed every week. You can set up a cron job for that, and as long as the YubiKey is plugged in, it will work.
Okay.
That's enough. You don't need the YubiKey to publish software into the repository. That's not what it is. The whitelist signing is like how stratum 0 tells the stratum 1s and the clients, like, you can still trust this.
Yeah, that's actually 30-day by default. That's the same. On top of that, if you want to have more bots and stuff like that publishing, it may be interesting to have a look at CVMFS gateway.
Yes.
Setup. Yeah, for future work. But
now, so the gateway setup is very interesting if you do very frequent publisher. I'm not sure that will happen for it could eventually, but yeah, I don't really expect it to become crazy busy there in terms of publishing. The publishing rates we see at some of the other CVMFS sites are insane. They're pushing like almost hundreds of gigabytes a day stuff in. I don't think we'll ever get to that. So I think a separate publisher node will already be a big help. You can actually have separate publisher nodes per subtree or something, per CPU type or anything like this. Scale it out a bit, that also works. Yeah, so slides are there. Yeah, but I still talk to that side. Yeah, so the stratum 0 is the starting point of that. The stratum 1, then we need new stratum 1s, so new domain, new stratum 0. We'll have to do that again anyway. And there, we think it's a good idea that we have a team of people in easy admins, let's call them, that are able to manage those stratum 1s. So we've seen before, I think it was the stratum 1 in Norway, which was stuck for whatever reason on an old revision of the repository. So it was serving old data. New installations were not being served through that one. So if you were connecting to that one, bad luck, you were stuck in the past, essentially. And we couldn't fix it ourselves. The only thing we could do is kick out that stratum 1 from our configuration and just say this is not part of the network anymore because it's broken, which is one way, but yeah, being able to fix it would have been better. So if we have proper monitoring and it tells us that the stratum 1 is behind, someone could actually dive in and fix that. Now, if you have stratum 1s that are parked in the cloud, in AWS and Azure, it's very easy to give a limited amount of people admin access there. If we're also hosting stratum 1s, public stratum 1s that are a part of our network at HPC sites, that will be more of a challenge. So I can't imagine I would get full admin access to a VM running in Surf. That's probably a hard no. It would not be different. That's more of a challenge. And then we need to wonder, what are we going to do? Do we have core stratum 1s that everyone can manage? And do we have friendly sites that help us in the network? If they cause trouble, we just kick them out of the config because there's nothing more we can do. Maybe that works as well. Once we have this new setup, once we have the easy.io domain, we can actually include our CVMFS configuration in the default package. And the CVMFS developers, the people who manage that package and a core set of repositories, they have like 3, 4, 5 big CVMFS repositories that they are using very actively in CERN and in the grid. They actually want us in there as well. they asked me this week, why haven't you done that yet? Yeah, because we want to do the secure setup first, and that's like a blocker for us. Ask you to add us in there. Once we're in there, anyone who installs CVMFS will get straight access to E. You don't need to install an extra package to actually do that. It will come by default together with CVMFS. So that's good. That will probably get us a bit more attention as well. Yep. Okay. Yeah. If we fail over, okay. If we You mean failing over from the old domain to the new domain, or like? Yeah. Right. Okay. So yeah. So that is sometimes a bit of a concern. Like you have this one central server, and if you lose that one, you're somewhat in trouble. In some sense, yes, you're not able to add new software, but thanks to the Stratum ones, in theory, as long as you have one Stratum one, everybody can still keep using Easy. So you have a full mirror of the whole thing. So as long as you keep enough monitoring and you make sure that when things go horribly wrong, you catch it early enough, it should be fine. But it may be worth having an easy way to restore the Stratum 1 in Ghent, for example. So have a full backup from Groningen to Ghent. Make sure we have the YubiKey there as well, and we can switch it over just to DNS.
Actually, what you can do if you have a Stratum 1 there already, that means that you have a hot spare because you can promote a Stratum 1 into a Stratum 0 by adding the key. It's quite trivial.
Promoting a Stratum 1 into the Stratum 0, as long as you have the YubiKey that can sign the whitelist, that should be it. Yeah, and indeed, if you have a Stratum 1, you already have a full copy of the repository. I mean, yeah. That's when they did the upgrade to Relate, right? Yeah, so that's maybe not something we should do straight from the start, because it's a pretty hypothetical scenario maybe. And even if we lose Stratum 0 for a little while, probably not terrible. But yeah, it's certainly something to keep into account long term, and to maybe actively also test whether we can make the switch and what happens. Doing that early on before we get very popular is probably a good idea as well, because it becomes trickier as we become more popular. To a different IP, yeah. Yeah, so just having some form of real backup and flipping the IP, yeah, could be good enough as well. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's more painful, promoting a Stratum 1 to Stratum 0 or just flipping it over through DNS. Yeah. And then, yeah, new version of the pilot stack. Well, pilot stack. We still call it pilot stack. If we have a new Stratum 0, maybe we need to take the next step and say we're becoming a bit more serious about this, and this is like the beta of what Easy will be very soon. So maybe this will be the last version that we can still say this is not production ready, and the next one will probably have to be production ready. Yeah. The bot, I see the bot as a blocker for this. I really want the bot to be able to build software for this first, whatever, call it beta or production or whatever not. And next to the production repository, we probably want the test repository as well. So something where we can ingest stuff into to test it first. Then we have a symlink, so we make sure the path is there exactly the same. Yeah, we have a setup like this. So very much like I think Compute Canada has this as well. Pre-production setup. where we can test stuff. This makes it a challenge for me, but yeah, and this was also recommended by Ryan from Compute Canada / the Alliance. He opened an issue for this in our repository. And yeah, wait for the new Stratum 0. Maybe. I mean, we can definitely start working on a new version on the current setup while we set up the new Stratum 0. Since it's a physical machine, we're probably not going to get that tomorrow, so that should not be a blocker. Whenever the new Stratum 0 is there, we can just rebuild again, and that's maybe then yet another version. So that maybe doesn't need to be a blocker, but I think the bot is. Yeah, and in there, especially if you have the bot, we can add a whole bunch of more software. That should be easy. We can install a newer toolchain as well. We can add what's necessary to have CUDA support. So have all the scripts that are being prepared in that pull request in there, together with documentation and all the bells and whistles we want. We'll drop power because up until now we haven't heard anyone who's really interested in that. And we'll move some of that effort into start looking into RISC-V. Then we also have to wonder, how serious are we about archiving the .06 and the .12 versions that we have now? We just drop them like a stone and say we were pilots, so we're allowed to just forget about these? Or do we use this as an opportunity to test the ideas we have for archiving and building containers and tarballs and having some form of keeping things alive long after we're supporting them? So yeah, we could see this as an opportunity as well. Someone will need to have the time to look into this. Yeah, and then the next slide, next event. So I think this went really well this week. We also had hackathons end of last year, early this year. So December and January, we had 2 hackathons that each lasted a week, which were fully virtual. So just through Zoom and Slack, we had a kickoff meeting on Monday morning where we said, welcome to the hackathon. Thanks for spending some time with us. This is what you can work on. And people just picked what they worked on, how much time they spent into that. We had a think meeting halfway through the week, like, are you stuck somewhere? Do you need help from someone? And at the end, we had a show and tell, like, what did you do? Did you make any progress? Did you hit a wall? Or did you figure out the next step? That's where we made quite a bit of progress with the bot, quite a bit of progress with the GPU support, with the tests as well, I think. So that's actually been very helpful. And people have actually come up to me this week and said, just having a focused list of things that you think are ready to make good progress on is already a big help. And we can probably activate many people through it. Frank joined it as well, and I think so a focused list of things, and then let's say the experts, so task leaders like Alan was for GPU and Kaspar was for testing. They have someone to talk to if you're playing with it and you can't figure it out, or you're stuck, or herding the cats a bit, trying to get some form of direction, the effort. I think we can pretty much use the same format as we did last week. So we just plan a week and say this is the hackathon week, and whenever you want to spend time on that, it's up to you. So you can definitely mix it with real work. Either spend half an hour per day or just take half an afternoon throughout the week or something like that. It's really up to you. The first one we did, it was in December 21, literally the week before the Christmas break. And we found that worked better than the one in January because people were like ramping down their real work. And they started to have gaps. What can I do this afternoon, especially like the days before the Christmas break? And then that's when they really started getting their hands dirty with Easy, because they knew whatever I do here, it doesn't have to be finished, or it doesn't really matter. That worked well. So I think just planning it that same week probably makes sense. And then a next community meeting. Maybe this will become a yearly thing. Maybe more frequent than that. Twice a year essentially. So still haven't made up our mind what we're going to do with the Easy Build user meeting. That's been going on for 7 years now. The previous 2 ones were virtual. We all know why. I definitely want to make it a physical meeting again, or at least a hybrid one. Now, it's always been the end of January, which is dead in the middle of winter, which is very hard to predict if is that going to be a good idea or a bad idea going forward. Maybe we should reschedule that to something like May, where chances are a bit less high that will run into trouble the week before. Lots of people can travel or restrictions or God knows what. And maybe we can combine it with an easy community meeting. So having like a hybrid form of easy and easy build combined. There's lots of people who use proactive in both communities, so that probably makes sense. Location, no idea. We always had the last physical easy build user meeting we had was in 2020, in end of January, so before the world changed a bit. And our idea there was to do the next one in Sweden. Maybe we can just stick to that plan and do the next one in Sweden and combine it with an easy community meeting. Sweden, maybe Norway makes a bit more sense since there's quite a bit of easy activity in Norway. Not sure. So yeah, we're open for ideas there. If anyone is up for hosting it, talk to Casper how much effort that is. You're probably gonna underestimate it. And it's probably gonna, yeah, it's gonna be more people as well, perhaps, hopefully. Well, certainly if you combine it with the easy build user meeting, it's gonna be more. The last physical one in Barcelona, there were over 50 people there. So combining it with easy, then maybe grow a little bit more, but we're not gonna fit in the room like this.
If you really separate like fixing a location, restaurants, etc., from the program, really have 2-3 people dedicated on organizing the program and one person organizing the location.
Yeah,
I think that helps a lot.
Yeah,
it wasn't too bad, to be honest. Not too much work.
And you get beer afterwards, right? Yeah. Yeah. So ideas around that are very welcome. We're probably not going to make up our mind. Well, we should make up our mind a bit earlier than we did this time, right? Not 3 weeks before. And maybe if everyone says, yeah, May is probably a pretty good idea. Like what we've always done for the easy build user meeting is tie it to FOSDEM in some sense. The week before, the week after. So FOSDEM is over the weekend. We could tie it to ISC, but then you're kind of forcing people to have like a really long trip, which is probably not a good idea either. And I think we're big enough that we can just detach ourselves from other stuff and just something on our own. And if people are convinced enough to come, they will come. Yeah, so maybe we're big enough that we don't really have to tie ourselves to something else anymore. And yeah, we'll keep doing it hybrid. People who don't want to travel, who can't travel, don't have the time to travel, will be able to join us remotely. That's always going to be the case, but then yeah, you have to buy your own beer. All right, yeah, so any thoughts on that? Yeah, Bob. At least 9 months in advance, yeah. Yeah. Then May 24 then, okay, something like this. Yeah. Yeah, that's it in terms of next steps. So yeah, if anyone's interested in actively helping out, Slack is absolutely the best way to get in touch with the community. We have monthly update meetings as well. Every first Thursday of the month. Am I saying it? No, first? Yes, first Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. Central European time. So that's the fixed time, and it's just a Zoom meeting. Drop in, listen in, or ask questions. It's always welcome there. That's a very good way to get in touch with the